But let's get to Jeff Paterson, who is brought to you by Greta, the home of our electric watch parties. See, I'm just all off today. Greta is our spot to chill pregame, postgame, and all through the offseason as well. Check out Greta Bar YVR today. And folks, I'm hinting at it. Last game of the season. Looks like we're doing another watch party at Greta. So make sure you get your tickets when they're available. And folks, I'll tell you when they're available, but mark it in your calendars. That last day, if people are asking you to hang out on that last day, tell them you've got the spot. And that spot is Greta to watch the last game of the season. This is an interesting thing. Bring in Jeff. This is my first question for Jeff. Interesting thing. Irfan Gaffar tweeted this today. Jeff, I'm not sure if you saw this, but the playoffs are now scheduled or rumored to be scheduled on April 20th, which would be 2 days after the Canucks play. That's a Saturday night. It's Hockey Night in Canada. Originally, it was supposed to start Monday, Tuesday on the 22nd and 23rd. We're now looking at 20th, 21st. Are the Canucks going to get screwed by the NHL here? Like, are the Canucks going to have to play 2 days at game one of the playoffs, 2 days after their last game of the season?
Yeah, quite possibly. And it's important to note, too, that they're in Winnipeg for game 82. And so, if they fly home after a game in Winnipeg, they're going to get home early in the morning. If they overnight in Winnipeg, then travel day on a Friday and you're playing on Saturday, that doesn't seem ideal. Really interesting, if you look at the NHL schedule on the 18th of April, I think there's 6 games. They're all Western Conference teams. So how about the East starts the playoffs on the 20th and gives all the Western teams a little bit of a breather there? Look, Saturday is Hockey Night, as you said. U.S. national television networks have adopted weekend programming down the stretch as well. It always seemed a little strange that they would let a weekend slide by without anything. So I'm not surprised at this. And in fact, Rogers has been running promos that the playoffs will start on the 20th. So you're right. I think originally it was going to be the 22nd, but kind of feels like everything's getting bumped up a little bit here. And we'll see how that impacts the Canucks and other teams. But it does feel like, and look, you can't control where you're going to end your schedule. A couple of years ago, it was St. Louis. I remember I was out on the road, the final game in St. Louis. Last year, it was Arizona. This year, it's Winnipeg. But the difference is the Canucks are going to the playoffs, and they play all year, and they may win the division, and the reward would be you have to hustle home from Winnipeg to get ready for your first playoff game. Not ideal in the way of scheduling, but got to deal with the curveballs as they come at you. We always talk about playoffs. You're going to deal with adversity. You might deal with adversity right off the hop with the scheduling of game number 1. So let's see how it goes here. But I did look at the league schedule on the final night of the regular season. It's all Western teams. So maybe the East can get the jump on the playoffs and at least buy everybody out West one more day.
Yeah, I wonder how they're going to go about that, because that's the thing, right? Is like all the Eastern teams, if it's Hockey Night in Canada, you want a late game, right? And if the playoffs started today, the Canucks and Golden Knights are the only series in the NHL that is going to take place in the Pacific time zone. Edmonton, LA, it would be in Edmonton for game 1, so that's Mountain. And I'm looking at it and saying I would not be shocked, and I'm throwing it out there early, I would not be shocked if the Canucks and Golden Knights, or whoever they face in round 1, the Canucks that is, are told, hey, we need a late game on Hockey Night in Canada and our national broadcast. So sorry, not sorry. You're going to start the playoffs on the 20th. I
certainly, like the Oilers can start in the late window as well, even in the Mountain Times. I mean, they do that every Saturday. The other thing too is, and you can't bank on this, but you can get an early game that goes late in the playoffs, right? Like you can get triple overtime on night number 1. So you just never know about TV windows and that kind of stuff. But yes, certainly a storyline worth following here, just because we know, even though they didn't get the X beside their name last night, the Canucks will be there when the playoffs start. It's just a question of when do the playoffs start.
Yeah, and they didn't get the X next to their name last night. So last night's game, Jeff, just some of your takeaways that you wanted to talk about from last night's loss.
Yeah, I agree with Harm. They didn't play poorly. They just didn't play well enough to win. And against this Los Angeles team, this is 3 games now. The Kings have opened the scoring in all 3. And the minute they do that, they get to dictate. They kind of dig in even more so and make you come at them. And I thought the Canucks did a nice job of that after the Kings had opened the scoring. You talked about the Lafferty goal. I thought the rest of the first period and the first 10 minutes of the second, there were opportunities for the Canucks, but ultimately they didn't make the most of those opportunities. And then the 2 quick goals by the Kings at 3-1. We talked to the players afterwards about the mindset going to the third period, knowing that you needed 2 against the Los Angeles Kings in 1 period, when to that point they hadn't scored more than 1 against the Kings in any of their 3 games. And I guess if there was a disappointment for me, it was those first 15 minutes of the third period. They had one shot on goal. Like, how can that make sense to anybody? Like, look desperate. If the Kings lock you down, hey, you tip your hat to them, but make it difficult on them. And I didn't think the Canucks did enough of that in the first 15 minutes. And I wrote a column that's up at Canucks Army. While I didn't think the Canucks top players played their best, I didn't think it was Rick Tocchet's finest moment. And this guy has pushed just about every button and has been above reproach most nights in the work that he has done. Still a presumptive front runner to win the Jack Adams as Coach of the Year. But he went to the line blender, and some of his decisions in that third period didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like a guy like Pius Suter, who doesn't score a lot, but the numbers show he makes JT Miller and Brock Besser better. And for whatever reason, when you're down and you need some offense, and he stuck to Suter as the third line center and played him with a bunch of different wingers. He went away from Höglander and Garland with Paterson, and that line's been working. Even if it wasn't working in the first 40 minutes, I still think I would have given those guys a little more leash. He tried Lotto line at one point, but look, Phil DiGiuseppe is your second line winger. That he went away from that one. That was the right call. But it felt like he was grasping as much as his team was last night. And ultimately, to see Nikita Zadorov as a net front, like that's kind of fun. But again, it felt like a reach. It's something we haven't seen from Rick Tocchet all year long. And whatever he threw at the wall, it didn't work. So for me, I didn't, you take Elias Lindholm out of the lineup, and we've already said this team is one scoring winger short. And you can see like how quickly depth becomes an issue for the Vancouver Canucks with just one sort of top 9 guy out of the mix. So, it was just odd. It had a strange feel. Part of that was Brock Besser just didn't have it last night. And I know he scored, but he was having a tough night on the first Los Angeles goal in the back check, the penalty they took on Drew Doughty, didn't have a shot attempt through 40 minutes. So I get where Rick Tocchet's coming from. He's trying his best to find anything that's going to spark his hockey club. But it was just curious to me the way that he went about his business in that third period. Bottom line is they came up a goal short. Give the Kings credit. The Canucks have yet to play with the lead. And forget the scoring the first goal. They have yet to play the lead against the Los Angeles Kings. And that just makes life really, really difficult on you. Not a lot of fun to watch, but also not much fun to play against. And they've got one more meeting with the Kings in Los Angeles on April the 6th. And then quite possibly they see them again come playoff time. Like, it's not at all out of the question that they could run into the Kings in that opening round. And if so, I think there'd be some concern in this market.
JPat, you alluded to with Lindholm and Joshua, of course, out. There's not a lot of quality top 6, top 9 winger options. Do you think if they enter the Dallas game and Lindholm and Joshua are still out, that perhaps Vasily Podkolzin is a player that you maybe give more of a look to, perhaps maybe even in the spot that PDG started the game?
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's time. I mean, Podkolzin's been hitting everything that moves, and now is starting. He had an assist, and then they took it away. Like, he didn't get an assist on the Lafferty goal officially, but we all know that he did a lot of the heavy lifting there. He's starting to play with confidence, and it does feel like the offense is coming a little bit. Now, they've moved him lower in the lineup than where he started a couple of weeks back, and I think some of that was to take the pressure of finding the score sheet. They just wanted him to be physical and win his puck battles and all those kinds of things. But he's a 10th overall pick. Like, you can't sweep the expectations entirely under the rug with this guy. At some point, he scored 14 and as a rookie. I'd kind of like to see him get a little bit of a run with JT Miller and Brock Besser. PDG, and again, if you want Pius Suter as a third line center, somebody's got to play up higher in the lineup. When I saw them line up at practice on Sunday, and it kind of gave the indication that they were preparing to go to battle without Elias Lindholm. And, we've talked throughout the season that even though he had a nice training camp and earned his spot, that the idea of PDG as a top 6 winger on this team wasn't ideal. And he did nothing, like a lot of them last night, certainly offensively, and barely played in the third period when they were chasing the hockey game. So, yeah, I think I'm ready to see Podkolzin get a little bit of a bump there and see what he can do. We saw Archdeep Baines was given an opportunity to play with JT Miller and Brock Besser at one point. So, Rick Tocchet hasn't been afraid to try some of that kind of stuff. And I think JT Miller's always had glowing reviews of Vasily Podkolzin and enjoyed playing with him and likes what he's seen from him. So, yeah, I kind of get the feeling that the time is now. Why not? I also just thought it was really curious, again, if they, and they know more than we do about Lindholm, but my sense here, a full day off for the team, and then a practice day, we'll get a better idea on practice UBC on Wednesday. But if they have to go with Lindholm again, like Nils Amon's a center. Could you not just slide Nils Amon to the fourth line center position and free Suter up to move up higher in the lineup if Podkolzin doesn't go into that spot? So we'll see what Rick Tocchet's thinking. We'll ultimately see what he and the coaching staff thought of the way things shook down against the Los Angeles Kings. But they need more from the top end guys in those games. They just got to find a way to break through. But as we said, they came up a goal short. Both teams got a lucky bounce, and it's just a steep hill to climb when you spot the Kings a 2-goal lead like the Canucks did.
JPat, a lot of the discussion in this market right now, and we've had plenty of it on our show as well, but we haven't had a chance to get your take on it yet, I don't think. Do you have an ideal first-round opponent for the Vancouver Canucks, especially in light of maybe what we saw from the game last night?
Yeah, I still think the Vegas Golden Knights aren't the Stanley Cup champs of last spring. They still hold the title, and until somebody knocks them off, they are the reigning champs. But I've made this point before. They got off to an 11-0-1 start. I think people forget. Like back then, the story was no cup hangover in a place like Vegas, and they won 11 of the first 12 games. Since then, they have been a 500 hockey club over a 55-game sample, and they haven't had the goaltending on a lot of nights. Obviously, they've had some injuries, but they just don't look like that wrecking machine that they were last spring when they rolled to the Stanley Cup final. Can they flip the switch? Can they get those good vibes back? They've got experience. They've got the pedigree. And ultimately, we'll see how many guys come racing off LTIR in time for I saw people joking that if the playoffs get bumped up 2 days, Vegas is going to have to figure out a way, get those guys healthy 2 days earlier. I still think, and I think, and you were there that night at T-Mobile not that long ago. Like, that was an impressive performance by the Canucks. They walked in through the front door and beat the Golden Knights. And people were saying, let's see the Canucks win some of these games against playoff opponents. That was a good night for the Vancouver Canucks. They got an early lead. They built on it. They were stingy defensively. Thatcher Demko was good when he had to be. I still think, I think this Los Angeles team, when they get locked in, and it's not just the Canucks, they can cause teams fits. And you do wonder if they get into the minds of the Canucks. If St. Louis somehow was to reel in Vegas, and obviously that was a bit of a death blow last night. So it is looking less and less like St. Louis is going to be a factor here. I think, for as crazy as it may sound, I think if you're picking an opponent in that first round, you take your chances against a Stanley Cup champ that just isn't on form. Maybe they get it back, but that too, I like the matchup against Vegas more than I do from what I've seen in 3 games against the Los Angeles Kings.
I always go back to Nashville. It's just they're getting hot at the right time, so it's a hard decision, and you almost don't want to pick your poison, right? And I also think, Jeff, that this team should have a bit of swagger about them and say, hey, you know what? We're the best team in the West. We're the best team in the Pacific, whatever you want to say. We could take any of these teams, and it's not who are we looking forward to matching up to. It's those teams that shouldn't be wanting to match up against us.
Well, it's important to remember, guys, the Canucks still have 2 to go against Vegas here in the regular season. They're going to have a big say in ultimately where Vegas finishes and if Vegas does finish in the playoffs. But again, getting that win last night in St. Louis was huge for the Golden Knights because that gives them a little bit of breathing room against the Blues in the playoff chase. So now it is a question of where the dust settles and ultimately who slots where, but 2 still head to head. So I think, this is the thing for the Canucks. I didn't ever expect that they were going to run the table on the 9-game homestand. And when they lost to Colorado and then lost to Washington, obviously there were 2 losses, but they responded from those with 3 straight wins. And it kind of felt to me like if they can get 2 of the 3 games this week, it's a 6-2-1 homestand at this time of the year. Oilers kind of spinning their wheels a little bit. I kind of felt like 6-2-1, 13 of a possible 18 points would allow the Canucks to maintain that cushion atop the Pacific Division. So then they go and they lose to the Kings. It puts some heat on the Vancouver Canucks now at the tail end of the homestand here. You got a Dallas team that's coming in and battling for top spot in the conference. That's not going to be easy. One of the highest scoring teams in the National Hockey League. They're in San Jose tonight, and then they'll be here on Thursday. And if it doesn't go well for the Canucks against the Stars, like suddenly that game against Anaheim is like an absolute can't slip on the banana peel kind of game at the tail end of a homestand. A Sunday afternoon, those early starts haven't always been friendly to the Vancouver Canucks. So, if they want to finish 6-2-1 on the homestand, it's still there for them. But now they have to beat the Dallas Stars and then take care of business against Anaheim on Sunday afternoon. So, good challenge on Thursday. More time off between these games here, full rest day and then a practice day. And, we'll see what they look like against the Stars on Thursday night.
Jeff, just going back to the game a little bit here. Casey DeSmith's been really good since Thatcher Demko went down. Is it safe to say that last night was maybe his worst performance since he's taken over as the Canucks starter?
I guess I would like to have seen him smother the rebound on the Kopitar goal. And Soucy putting the triple bounce off Carson Soucy and in, like not a whole lot that DeSmith can do there. So I'm not hanging him out to dry. And really on that first goal, Fiala, the breakdowns all over the place. Again, the Canucks were just off. Didn't have a man on the ice. They basically gave LA an in-game power play because the Canucks were slow on the change there. And Fiala's not going to miss when he has half the net to shoot at the way he did. So, in terms of the goals that got past him, really it was the Kopitar one. And it was just, and I still haven't seen a great look. And I don't know if you guys did, did Byfield deflect it, or is that a puck that DeSmith should have been able to trap against his body and not leave lying around, because ultimately it squirts free to the back post. And that's when Kopitar swooped in from behind the net and tapped it in. But, look, he's aggressive. He comes out. We saw 2 of those blue paint kind of goals last night. He's not the biggest goaltender in the world. And I think tries to compensate for that a little bit by being aggressive and playing at the top of the paint and that kind of stuff. But that does leave a little bit of room in behind him. So I'm not pinning that one on him necessarily. As I said, there was a bounce each way. The Besser goal kind of negated the second Los Angeles goal. I thought Casey DeSmith did what he had to do to give the Canucks a chance to pull this game out. Look, they make it 3-2 with 4 minutes to go. And yes, they pressured at that point. But I'm not sure that I'm hanging this on Casey DeSmith. Ultimately, Cam Talbot made, one more save than he did. But DeSmith's been fine. And, in my world, he's going to run it back out there again on Thursday against Dallas. I do think if they beat the Stars on Thursday, that you probably would see Artur Silovs for the first time this season against the Ducks on Sunday afternoon. I do wonder, though, if they don't beat the Stars and go back to the scenario I just mentioned, where the game against Anaheim then takes on a little more significance at some point. I do think, because they've got the back-to-backs next week, right, in Vegas and Arizona. I would assume you split those. I think in Artur Silovs' best interest to get him a game before he has to get thrown in there. So we'll see how things shake down the rest of this week. But look, I think I can answer your question. That was it his poorest performance of the homestand? Maybe. And yet in saying that, I still don't think he was responsible for the ultimate outcome of that hockey game.
What do you think the thought process was behind the coaching staff mixing up the D pairs, and how do you think the new look D pairs looked last night?
Yeah, I think, and Rick Tocchet was asked about it after the game. I think it was opponent driven harm, in as much as they know how the LA Kings want to play the aggressive forecheck. And I think it was trying to spread their puck movers out a little bit and put Hronek on one pair and Hughes on the other. And I have to say, I know they lost the hockey game. Quinn Hughes skated miles last night. And that's not a news flash because he does it most nights. But I thought he was incredible. Unfortunately, like his team, just no finish there. And a lot of his forays into the offensive zone didn't amount to much. But, for a team that loves to pressure like the Kings do, Hughes was he was, I think, near the top of his game. And again, that's saying something just in terms of being a one-man breakout machine. So ultimately, the game dictated that when they were down in the third period, then they go back to Hughes Hronek. So I wasn't surprised about that. Was there enough of a sample size otherwise to get a true read on the defensive pairings? Defensively, again, the Canucks were fine last night. I still think you're going to see a lot of Hughes and Hronek. And did you see Quinn Hughes played the final 3 minutes and 57 seconds of the hockey game? Came off the ice once in the final 5.5 minutes. So, they were leaning on him, and he's their best chance to generate the goal that you're looking for to equalize. But defensively they're fine. I thought Zadorov, the big hit on Lizotte early in the game, I thought that's what you want from Nikita Zadorov. Try to set the tone there. Soucy and Cole had their moments as well. Although interesting with Quinn playing as much as he did in third, Carson Soucy only played 12 minutes of the hockey game. So, he's not going to generate offense as you're down and you're trailing. Somebody's going to have to sit, and ultimately it was Carson Soucy. But that jumped off the page as much as Quinn Hughes in his 26 and a half minutes did. So did Carson Soucy, only playing 12 minutes and I think 3 in the third period. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think in some ways, 10 games to go, maybe this is the time to experiment. And yet you saw that they had to abandon the experiment when they were down and chasing the hockey game.
Jeff, good stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will chat with you next week in playoffs. Playoffs are just around the corner.
Yeah, we just need a start date.
And in other news, Mark Stone's start date has been moved up as well. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this.
All right, guys, thanks.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.